Hello and welcome to Kala-I-doscope with India Ahead. Thank you for joining us today on the day post the big election verdict, especially in West Bengal and other states as well. Today we're going to be discussing a couple of things, starting of course with the political violence that we're seeing in West Bengal, something that we're not really surprised with, but it still leaves one astounded to see the scale of the violence that has followed Mamata Banerjee's victory yet again. So if we were expecting magnanimity at the time of that victory and the end to political violence, which was really the norm in the lead up to the elections, we have been disappointed. And of course, post that, we're going to be discussing election results in West Bengal and Assam, two different states, two neighboring states with different results, and try and figure out what would the way it did in both these states, and why was the BJP successful in one state and not in the other? How did Mamata score despite an aggressive campaign and all of those things? But most importantly, we're going to talk about the very, very important issue of political violence and the fact that as we speak, people are being terrorized in the state of West Bengal and losing their lives. There have been a couple of deaths, as well as seeing their homes burnt, offices of the BJP burnt, and in both these states, and why was the BJP successful in one state and the other? How did Mamata score? A little bit of an overlap, sorry about that. And yes, so to continue with our conversation today, I have with me, of course, a familiar face now, Sandipan, who joined us last week and is back again. Thank you so much, Mr. Dev. I could have just met to only discuss the election results and analyze that. But unfortunately, the violence that we've seen from last night, it's incumbent on us really to speak of that and raise some awareness. And of course, Siddharth Singh, you're familiar with him as well, was with us last week, back again today. Thank you for joining us, Siddharth. Siddharth's kept a particular eye out for what's happening in Assam. So we're looking forward to discussing that as well, because that's also a very interesting result and a historic one in its own right. Starting with you, Mr. Dev, if you can just explain to our viewers a little bit about the history of political violence in West Bengal and the fact that it's very much a part of political life there.
Yes, Bengal's politics has an extremely violent history, at least for the last 50 years. In the last 2 decades, it has not even been reported widely in the national media, perhaps because the Calcutta correspondents of the national media did not see it as anything other than business as usual. The CPM's thugs were known as Harmats, which is Bengali for pirates. And the Trinamool thugs are known as Bhairabs today. Bhairab, ironically, is the name of one of the names of Lord Shiva in his destroyer form. Mamata Banerjee herself faced the left's thugs and with great physical courage, I must say, and escaped death by a whisker, maybe a couple of times or maybe more. So her climb to power has been marked with her growing her own army, because she saw that as one lethal way to counter the left. And after she has become chief minister, this army has more or less ruled many aspects of life in at least semi-urban and rural India, whether it's petty extortion or protection money, voter intimidation, political killings. More than 100 BJP workers are supposed to have been murdered in the last 10 years under Mamata Banerjee's chief ministership. If you think about that number, it's basically one BJP worker murdered every month for the last 10 years. The thing is that the people who are being looted and attacked today are people who have risked their lives and livelihoods for years for their political beliefs. And sadly enough, possibly suspected that this could happen if BJP lost these elections. As far as I know, Mamata Banerjee has not even acknowledged the current violence.
No, she hasn't.
She hasn't. And definitely she has not asked the thugs to desist. The problem is that the police in West Bengal is extremely politically compromised. And they have been turning a blind eye to this sort of violence for the last decade. This is nothing new for them. So I really don't know how this will end. This is terrible, terrible.
Mr. Dev, is this a violence that is in waves, or is it a violence that we'll see right now and then at times when there is an election coming up?
No, when there is an election coming up, there is a rise in violence, but uh, general life, as I understand, in semi-urban and rural West Bengal, there is always a simmering undercurrent set of violence. The height of political violence was possibly in the 2018 or 2018 panchayat elections, when
Yes,
30 or 40% of the seats went unopposed. I mean,
exactly.
nobody had the guts to stand up to the thugs and even, uh, you know, file a nomination against the
Hmm.
Trinamool Congress candidate. That was, I think, the height.
And that was shocking. I'm surprised that, sitting in Delhi, so many people are talking about the new dawn and democracy and this and that, and a win for democratic
No,
values.
but Advaita, as I said, the most unfortunate thing is I am not at all surprised that this is happening. This was expected. Everybody knew that this would happen if Trinamool won the elections. It would, Trinamool's thugs would seek vengeance, bloody vengeance.
Hmm, hmm. And they are, and they
Yeah.
are. Siddharth, why do you think that the national media in Delhi, who has been kind of giving her these glorious headlines, and if we were to look at it only from the political sphere, then she has earned them, no doubt. She's had a decisive victory, but they're so silent about this kind of rampaging that's going on in the state. And thanks to social media, is coming in front of the public.
See, I, I, I can only, you know, try and join the dots about what is happening. The national press usually is very careful about reporting political violence. I won't say careful in the sense that they probably have a certain threshold beyond which they report, and then they have their own biases about what are they going to report, what they are not going to report. To take a different example, I mean, there has been a lot of violence in Kerala also at a
Yes.
different period of time, and
Not now, though.
not
I
not
must.
not now though. Um, I haven't seen any large scale criticism of that kind of violence in the press ever. If you were to compare it with other states which are probably ruled by the ruling party at the center, probably the threshold of reporting violence is much lower. They, for example, if something of this kind or even approximating this kind were to happen in UP or in some other state, by now, uh, you know,
New York Times would be writing about it.
probably they would be the first ones to write about it. But
Hmm.
yes, it also I concur with Sandipan that probably it also depends upon how local correspondents are reporting, whether they are sending those stories to their papers here in Delhi. But all this is moot. Obviously the scale of the violence is known. What is happening on the ground is known. Surely some editors can go about telling that that their correspondents to follow it up, that if there is indeed such a thing.
Hmm.
um, so I mean, it's not just Bengal versus Kerala or Uttar Pradesh or any other state or even Maoist hit states, where violence is of course of a very different and extreme kind. The press seems to have its own peculiarities about how it goes about reporting them, what kind of stories it goes about picking, different thresholds for different kinds of violence. I mean, it's a fascinating topic in its own right, although the consequences for those people who are bearing the brunt of it are probably, you know, horrible.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, and it traumatizes. I know from my work in Kannur, I'm very glad that there isn't any violence today. I mean, I've been following political violence for 6 years now. But I know from my work in Kannur and meeting with victims and families of people who have been killed in political violence that it's very traumatic. And there's a lot of what you would call PTSD that continues 5-10 years down the line as well, because this violence tends to be very public, and it's a spectacle because it's also aimed to ensure that other people get scared and intimidated. It's very Machiavellian. I think Machiavelli kind of suggested that in terms of retribution that the prince must extract and make a public show of it. It's done along those same lines. And And it's extremely traumatic for people who even survive this kind of violence. And for me, when you are saying that this is democracy served and democracy revived because Mamata Banerjee has won, then how can you look away when this kind of macabre dance of democracy is going on? That just continues to bother me on a very personal level as well. Mr. Dev, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. See, Mamata Banerjee, I don't know when she or if she will say something to stop this violence. But I think it is incumbent on the Bharatiya Janata Party, the high command of the Bharatiya Janata Party, to take cognizance of this violence and do whatever they can to
Yes.
Protect these people. I know personally that I've been getting messages. There are hundreds of Bharatiya Janata Party workers of West Bengal today who are in hiding. They cannot go back to their own localities where they have lived since they were born. They are in hiding in remote places, etc. They don't know when they'll be able to go back. There are professors of Calcutta University who cannot enter the university campus, or they fear that if they go to the campus, they could be beaten up or harmed in some other way. There is a reign of terror going on just now in Bengal, and I think it is extremely necessary for BJP to do something about it, because if the BJP does not save its workers now in a state where it has made quite a grand entry, even though certainly the party would be disappointed because it did not win a majority, but still it is a very grand entry. The state has been turned for the foreseeable future into a two-party system. Congress and the left are wiped out. BJP is the main opposition. If the BJP does not move now to protect its workers, to give them solace, to give them succor, then the party organization will wither away.
Yes,
This
absolutely.
deep grassroots white party organization is a recent phenomenon for the BJP. It has built it over the last 3 or 4 years. And if it doesn't protect this organization now, it will lose that organization. Why should somebody put his life at peril, especially when his high command, his national leaders do not do anything to save him?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, high command, or, like I was telling you earlier, also people who have been candidates for this election, and the cadre has gone out onto the ground for them and targeting today because of them. I mean, what are they doing to raise awareness? And correct me if I'm wrong, when Mamata was taking to the streets to save her cadre and from the communists, she didn't even have those many seats in the assembly as the BJP does today.
Not at all. Not at all. She not only faced the huge army of left front thugs, street thugs. Jyoti Basu, as chief minister, ordered police firing several times on her processions. So she fought both the thugs and the state. So in a way, what the BJP workers are facing today are somewhat similar, except that there has not been any official police firing. That has been replaced by police apathy to these crimes.
No, I mean, and there are comments are coming in, and people are just trying to understand. I asked Siddharth this question, and you've answered it as well. Why the national media is not kind of raising a stink about it, because I know from my experience in Kannur that when the national media started to take notice of this violence, which had been going on for 40 years there as well, I think wherever the communists go, somehow political violence follows. But once the national media started paying attention, and it took a while to get them to do that, the violence subsided. So I know that it works for a fact, because I've had that experience. Of course, it also helped that Pinarayi Vijayan, who is from Kannur and has been accused in violent cases himself as a young man, took over as chief minister, and that had part to play because it impacted his image. And politicians are about image, but we had seen a reduction in violence. So my appeal really is that the national media should do this just as a form of censure. It's not about being partisan, but just as a form of censure, so that Didi, who is celebrated as being the queen of democracy, really finds her humanity. And that's just my only appeal. But moving on from this, on to the elections, Mr. Dev, what do you think of these results? I mean, there was, of course, this tendency to believe that, the BJP would do very well. I think that, and they have done very well. I think the fact that they didn't win is usually used against them now, but in terms of a debut, it's quite a remarkable debut in West Bengal.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite a remarkable debut. And what we are seeing now, as I said, West Bengal has become a two-horse town now. Its polity is a two-party polity, and it will remain so for as far as I can see. What has also happened in these elections is that there's been tremendous vote consolidation. In fact, I mean, you can even call it polarization. I don't think what happened was every non-BJP vote has gone to the Trinamool. For example, the Muslims who comprise 30% of the electorate, they have not wasted a single vote. Well, I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating when I say a single vote, but they have voted for the party that had the best chance of beating BJP.
Right.
So, I mean, that is one factor. There are 2-3 other interesting things, mainly to deal with how Bengalis portrayed the BJP's entry into Bengal as an attack on Bengali culture and ethos, but we can talk about that later.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
What this election has shown, the results have shown, is that Bengali exceptionalism, that we are a breed different from everybody, that exceptionalism remains true, intact, triumphant. See, Mamta...
Outsider-insider things did strike a chord, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Mamta portrayed this election as a war against non-Bengali invaders. See, there were terms used, like the term Borgi. Borgi is a term that is part of lullabies sung to Bengali children at their bedtime, traditional lullabies. The Borgi refers to the Maratha invaders in the 18th century. So Mamta referred to the BJP as Borgis, invaders of Bengal. And that has worked. And the BJP has also helped in that perception because of its heavy dependence on non-Bengali leaders in its campaign, which Mamta kept on pointing out with great disdain and contempt. There was no chief ministerial face. There was no son of the soil leader with wide appeal across the state. These things have cost the BJP very dear.
Dearly. Siddharth, do you think, Suvendu Adhikari is someone who could be that leader in the BJP? Because they have had a paucity of sorts in the local leadership. Although, I mean, there are people who have stood out, but in terms of the fact that he's won, defeated Mamta and all of those things.
I think his performance in the coming time, because let's look at it this way. Until he came over to the BJP and he got that kind of recognition, in the TMC, he might have been an important local face somewhere in the political system of the Trinamool Congress. But now he's in the BJP, and yes, as you say, that he's defeated Mamta Banerjee. Probably his face has some recognition, But I guess a lot will depend that how does he. It's the only opposition party. What does he do? How does he perform in the assembly? How does he raise those issues? A lot will depend on what he does in the coming time. I mean, if you that sort of facial recognition that he's defeated that big leader, it can only take you that far. Beyond that, a lot depends on what does he bring to the table. I think.
Yeah, but
you have to watch for that.
I know you observe Assam very carefully, and I'll switch to a little bit to Hindi also because that's what. पर अगर आप असम में देखें और वहाँ जो हिमंता बिस्वा शर्मा है जिन्होंने कांग्रेस छोड़ के बीजेपी ज्वाइन किया 2015 में, और उसके बाद काफी तेज गति से उन्होंने अपना खुद का जो प्रेजेंस कहते हैं हम भारतीय जनता पार्टी में बनाया है, और अब वहाँ के काफी भाजपा के बहुत बड़े नेता है असम के, तो सुवेंदु अधिकारी भी क्या उसी पैटर्न पे जा सकते हैं?
देखिए, इस तरीके की तुलना करना मेरे मतलब मुझे लगता है कि शायद हम जल्दी कर रहे हैं ऐसी तुलना करने में, क्योंकि देखिए जो हिमिंता जी हैं वो बीजेपी में आने से पहले भी कांग्रेस के भी एक बड़े दिग्गज नेता थे।
जी।
अब मतलब मेरे लिए ये कहना उचित नहीं होगा कि एक तुलनात्मक उसमें कि शुभेंदु जो है वो उनकी बराबरी के हैं, वैसे किया जा सकता है, वैसी बात वो मेरे ख्याल से मुझे लगता है कि वो ठीक नहीं होगा। क्या वे आगे हिंसा जैसे नेता बन सकते हैं, ये अभी देखने की बात है, क्योंकि देखिए बंगाल की राजनीति और असम की राजनीति बहुत भिन्न है, उनमें बहुत कम मेल है। मतलब वो आ, जैसे आपने बोला अभी बंगाल की राजनीति में वो अंदर और बाहर की, मतलब वो एक वो उस पर राजनीति चली है कि जो भाजपा वाले हैं वो बाहर के लोग हैं। असम की राजनीति बनस्पत इसके वहां भी अंदर बाहर है, लेकिन वो एक बहुत अलग तरीके से अंदर बाहर है। वहां जो इलीगल माइग्रेंट्स आ रहे हैं
जी।
और उनको रोकने की कोई कोशिश नहीं की गई और वो अपने में एक वोट बैंक बन गए, उनकी राजनीति उन उन विषयों पे चलती है। ऐसा
हम्म।
बंगाल में नहीं देखा गया है जहां तक मुझे पता है। तो ये
हम्म।
ये तो समय ही बताएगा कि शुभेंदु जी अगर वो वैसे ही ये कह सकते हैं कि उनके पास अब एक मैदान है, आ, उनको
और
एक मौका
क्षमता भी
भी है,
दिखाई
क्षमता
क्षमता को।
भी है, मतलब तो
पर अभी तो जो हाल बंगाल में चल रहा है, अब तो कहना चाहती हूँ कि उनको तो सुरक्षा सबसे पहले मिलनी चाहिए, क्योंकि उन्होंने तो बहुत ही बड़ी लड़ाई ले ली है।
देखिए
देखो।
राजनीतिक हिंसा तो कहीं पे भी हो उसको उसकी निंदा
हम्म।
ही करनी चाहिए। तो
बिल्कुल। Sandipan, there's this thing about the minority vote
Hmm.
and Mamta's appeasement, and I always find it interesting that when the minority votes together, it is not considered consolidation or polarization,
Hmm.
but if Hindus vote together or they vote across caste lines for
Hmm.
more, then it's called polarization and consolidation and majoritarianism and everything.
Hmm.
I mean, why are we not viewing this that people are voting along religious lines, and the fact that when they do as a minority, it's good, but if they do as Hindus, then it's bad? Should people
No.
be voting along religious lines at all? I know it's a very simple question, but
See, Advaita, what we have seen over these last years is that somehow the language of politics has changed. Words have lost meaning. So, for example, the word liberal has lost meaning. Some of the people are who are called liberal are the most illiberal. Uh, Minority appeasement is seen as secularism. Secularism, the word itself, the definition seems to have changed to minorityism, if I can use that word. Pandering to minorities must be given every equal right, everything that the Constitution guarantees, perhaps more than the Constitution guarantees, to make them feel protected and uh, not scared, etc. But when it comes to uh, pandering to them, it erodes the whole basis of secularism that we have understood. I think the word secular itself has taken on a different meaning. I saw a eminent French academician writing a column last year who said liberal parties like Trinamool Congress and Samajwadi Party, these are liberal parties. Does he know anything about the sort of repression of media that has happened under Mamata Banerjee? Today in Bengali media, there is hardly anybody, local media, if you're based in West Bengal, there is hardly anybody who can write against Trinamool Congress or Mamata Banerjee. No owner, no media owner has the courage to write against. There are very obvious commercial reasons also. In a state where there is not much advertising, where there is not much purchasing power, the revenues of print media at least depend to a large extent on government advertising. So for purely financial reasons, and Mamata knows that very well. She has settled in public that I will not advertise. I will not give government advertisements in papers that criticize me. क्या कर लोगे? बोल दिया. क्या कर लोगे तुम? कुछ नहीं कर पाओगे. So you just go out of your way to praise these things. and praise this false secularism, false liberalism, this and sometimes quite dangerous trends that we can see around us.
No, absolutely. And I mean, of course, I don't want to get into the broad strokes of how the media covers certain politicians and how it covers another set of politicians. But, Siddharth, even in Assam, for example, it has a sizable minority population. In fact, more than Bengal or whatever some statistics have said. However, you see a very different result in Assam. Would you like to kind of explain that to us?
See, the first thing worth noting in Assam is that there is no homogeneous Muslim bloc. There are indigenous Assamese Muslims who actually vote for the AGP. They are least likely to vote for the new party, AIUDF. That's probably Bengali Muslims who are going to vote for that party. So the first thing that should be noted is that. Secondly, these two very different groups of Muslims, they are not a cohesive social group. Probably they have very little social interaction. Their ways of life are different. Assamese Muslims are very proud of their linguistic identity.
They are. So they consider themselves different also.
They consider themselves differently. So when you look at the results of what has happened, I'm not surprised at all that there is a clear division between Lower Assam and Upper Assam. In Lower Assam, the BJP has been wiped out effectively. And in Upper Assam, the coalition between AIUDF and Congress, it's almost barring a handful of seats. It's not got anything. So what that has done to the politics of that state is that the so-called peripheral areas like Bodoland, they have become the determining factors in who's going to win. Although that's strictly not true, because when you look at the BJP's own performance, that's been more than sufficient to, overcome any kind of hurdle which might have come in its way. Now, the reason is that it's a very interesting state that way. If you remember the time immediately after the Citizenship Amendment Act was passed, there was extensive violence in the state because indigenous Assamese, they are dead set against any kind of constitutional recognition being given to any illegal migrant.
Hindu or Muslim, yes.
Hindu or they don't like any illegal migrant. So to say that there is so to come back to the present, to read headlines which say, oh, the BJP has consolidated its identity, it's gone in for identity politics. Probably it's not strictly true. If you ask any Assamese, it doesn't matter whether he's a Hindu or whether he's a Muslim. By Assamese, I mean, say, someone who speaks the Assamese language. His politics is very clear. He's going with the BJP because he thinks that this is the party that can stop all that has gone on for a very, very long period of time. It's got nothing to do with secularism. It's got nothing to do with religious identity per se. Those are what should I say, very Delhi-centric interpretations of what goes on, what are very, very peculiar local features of that state.
No, that's interesting. And also, they've lost a very tall leader in Taran Gogoi, who I think had a lot of personal cachet, at least, in terms of with the people, a very direct relationship with the people. Unlike, what happens right now, or what the situation the Congress finds itself in, which really brings me to the Congress. I saw Rahul Gandhi's tweet yesterday, and he said that I was very happy to thank, I'm paraphrasing, very happy to thank Mamata Banerjee for soundly defeating the BJP. And then I saw a spokesperson who tweeted from the Congress, which I thought was very brave of him, who said that, if we Congresses are going to constantly look for some pleasure in BJP's defeats and not do any introspection ourselves, how far are we going to go, or something to that effect? This attitude that the Congress has, because if you look at their performance, I mean, in this election, It's appalling. I mean, in Tamil Nadu, they've got fewer seats, I think, this time in the alliance, and the DMK has really brought them into power. Puducherry, they're out. Kerala, which, I mean, you had a corruption case that landed straight at the chief minister's office, and you were still not able to do anything and even though you're the alternative in that state and the state flips every 5 years. You weren't able to pull that off. And of course, not to mention Rahul Gandhi is the MP from Wayanad and was very actively participating in the election there. And of course, Assam, they did okay. Nowhere near what they thought they would do. In fact, I think that alliance that they did went against them. And finally, in Bengal, for which he was happy to congratulate Mamata Banerjee, they're down to 0. So what kind of a crisis is this? Is this a crisis, or is it just now the way it is with the Congress? Mr. Dev?
I think Congress has been reduced to a regional party, a Punjab regional party. I don't see the Congress making headway in any other state in the near future, unless they completely, they have to acknowledge openly what is wrong with the party and take some measures. Rahul Gandhi's leadership, to put it extremely mildly, is, let's say, uninspiring. And and the way he has been spending his time over the last year doing Zoom calls with Indian American professors and American ambassadors and asking former American diplomats for the United States to intervene in the Indian democracy, I frankly think he's lost it. And unless he gets his act back together, Congress is getting nowhere. And I don't think the Congress will ever be able to be together, be united without the family at its center. It may possibly break up into regional units with the regional satraps who have some mass appeal in their own states, etc. If the family removes itself or is removed, then why should one regional satrap listen to another? Why should Amarinder Singh listen to Ashok Gehlot? In fact, Sachin Pilot himself doesn't want to listen too much to Ashok Gehlot.
Yeah.
So I think the Congress right now has an extremely bleak future. It completely has to reinvent itself. And I don't think in the present state of affairs it can. Right now, it is just a regional party, Punjab. Yes, Rajasthan, but it's mainly Punjab. The only Congress leader who is confident and who will keep on winning elections is Amarinder Singh. I don't see much future.
You noticed even for Bengal, he didn't campaign at all in the first 4 phases. I think he already knew pretty much that it was going to be futile. And in the next 4, then he said, COVID, and I'm not going to do it. And then he tested positive. So there's defeatist kind of attitude also, isn't there?
Is defeatist, and also his congratulating the BJP as congratulating Mamata Banerjee for defeating the BJP. See, in Bengali, there's a saying, Nijer naak kete porer jacha noshto. You hack your own nose off just to spoil somebody else's trip. So that seems to sort of epitomize Rahul Gandhi's, what he has been saying. He himself, his own political future seems ruined, but he is happy. And to some extent, he himself has contributed to the political future of his family's, and to his parties. And he is happy because somebody else hasn't done as well as they thought that they would. This is, worse than Schadenfreude. This is useless.
Siddharth, what do you have to say on this? Do you think it's something that he's waiting for his time, or as they say?
It's been a fairly long time for him. He's been one of the senior leaders of the party for a while now, and it's also been a long time that the party has not seen any major victories in any of the main Indian states. In 2018, they had these 3 states, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh.
Right.
But if you look at the Lok Sabha elections, they did very poorly in all 3. and in Madhya Pradesh, they even lost the state government. Now, apart from all issues of personality about what he's doing or this thing, I think the party lacks a focus that what does it want to do? What is its audience? Who are the people whom it's trying to bring on its to its fold, or he is trying to, convince that it's a better alternative to the BJP? I don't see any of that careful messaging, which is so necessary in trying to, uh, give BJP a sound fight. Now, on the other side, if you look at the BJP, they fight every election with the same intensity. It doesn't matter whether they are going to win the election over there or whether they're going to lose the election over there. And what I notice in the Congress's campaigns is, a certain kind of lifelessness. It's also that probably they have not uh, understood the changed nature of Indian politics, that it's not a default switch between two parties, that you wait for one to make a number of mistakes and then you walk in the next election and take it away from them.
Yes.
Every election is fought, every election is contested. I mean, I saw that the BJP dispatched its top leaders for a municipal election in Andhra Pradesh and Hyderabad. I haven't seen the Congress fight any local election with that kind of intensity. What to talk about fighting state elections? But coming to the current round of elections, and I agree with your point. I forget Assam. Within Assam Congress, there were voices that said that don't go for this alliance with AIUDF. It's not going to serve us. It's only going to create more problems for us. Forget Assam and Bengal, where any serious political analyst would tell you that they didn't stand a chance. I think the real loss for the Congress is Kerala.
Yeah.
Is Kerala. It was their state to take away. It's a classic swing state where even a small fraction of change in the even if a small fraction of voters change their preferences in the next election, there's the political complexion of the state changes. I mean, and then you look at it. If you look at the relative amount of time which was spent by Congress leaders, the energy which they put in the campaign, I mean, it was disproportionate in the south as compared to Assam or I'm talking of the top leaders of the party. And yet, look at the results.
And the fact that he is now an MP from Kerala. So, I mean, that's his home ground, technically. Yeah. So one would have thought that it would invigorate at least the cadre, if no one else.
And even in Tamil Nadu, they're a junior partner.
Yeah. And Stalin is a dynast in his own right. So
not only a dynast, he comes from a far more stronger political party with far deeper roots than the Congress. The Congress
experience. He became, I think, the president of the youth wing in 1980. Until his father died, he was doing that. So a lot of work, a lot of patience that went into it. He's 68 now. So I mean, from 80 to 2018, I think was when the senior Karunanidhi passed on. He was, waiting in the wings and working his way through. So he has earned his stripes in some way.
Yes.
In a way that I think Rahul Gandhi, it's actually now even about him, there aren't too many points to talk on. That's how it's switched. But coming to this other aspect that's coming up, because Mamta's this win right now in 2021 has restarted the conversation of a federal front that can possibly take on Modi in 2024. And because of the present COVID situation and the chaos and things like that, of course, there is a certain sense that things could shift or might shift, or at least that's the hope that the opposition has. And they feel fine about articulating it also. Do you think this federal front is a reality, or is it another pipe dream? Because there are just so many characters that to get them together on one stage to perform like a orchestra will be probably impossible. And any of you can start. Mr. Dev can start.
Well, it's 2024 when the next Lok Sabha elections will take place, and a lot of stuff can change in 3 years in the political scenario. But as things stand right now, after this West Bengal victory, definitely there will be a concerted effort to build some sort of federal front, because next year there are the Uttar Pradesh elections, which are extremely critical. And
congratulations also came very fast. Sharad Pawar, Arvind Kejriwal,
yes,
Yadav, like one after the other,
yes,
Stalin.
Yes, I suspect that Sharad Pawar would take a leading role in putting this, bringing these parties together to the table and trying to form a federal front. And as things stand right now, possibly Mamata has a very good chance of being projected as the prime ministerial face of the federal front. I will not be surprised, even with an extremely poor Hindi, if she campaigns in Uttar Pradesh in the next UP Assembly elections. Because right now she symbolizes victory over the BJP.
And Yogi did go to Bengal.
So. Yeah, Yogi did go to Bengal. And I think he damaged the BJP's chances a bit, because in his rallies he spoke about Romeo squads and all that, which is completely inappropriate to Bengal society. I mean, Bengalis will not stand for this sort of stuff. But I'm sure Mamata Banerjee will campaign in UP, because right now she symbolizes victory over BJP. How long it will last?
Does she have an appeal, you think, in the Hindi-speaking belt, so to speak? And she's made such a fuss of Bahari and outsider and all of that.
I think right now, over the next week or so, or the next fortnight, there'll be enormous coverage in all the Hindi papers, Hindi television channels on Mamata's victory. Because frankly, no one expected such a large victory for her. She has increased her seats. She has increased her vote share by 4.5%, which is quite phenomenal. So she will get a huge amount of coverage. And if Sharad Pawar has his way, he will try to strike while the iron is hot and start the negotiations, etc. Whatever. Whether it will last, this federal front, one does not know. One can't predict that. I mean, these fronts have had a very, let's say, checkered history from the Janata Party time onwards.
But Siddharth, maybe the Congress will be more amiable to a front like that, unlike the last time, because they've only reduced in power. So earlier on, they were the holdouts, so to speak. Remember that galaxy that they had up on stage in Kolkata, and Rahul Gandhi didn't turn up, or the Gandhis didn't turn up, and I think they sent Ghulam Nabi Azad or someone.
The question is, it's not whether the Congress will find it acceptable. The question is the other way around, whether they would want the Congress to come into, because look at it this way, although it's debatable now, probably the Congress was the only serious rival to the BJP for a while, in that post 2014 to about 2017-18 phase. But after the 2019 elections, when the BJP not only came for the second time, but it got even more seats. Since 2019, they have not got their act together. So I'm not sure. Probably, when, as Sandipan said, that the UP elections are pretty close by, the real damage to the BJP potentially comes from the COVID situation in that state and in North India than some other political leader from some other state coming and campaigning over there. But yes, there is a gap between now and 2024. It's a substantial period of time. Even Prashant Kishore has said that Narendra Modi and Amit Shah are very nimble political leaders. They'll figure a way.
They'll figure it out. Yeah.
They'll figure it out. So, and the other thing about the federal front, if you go back to the 90s and if you look at their history, the one central tendency of that period was that they wanted a weak prime minister. They did not want a strong prime minister, because that affects their interstate bargaining between leaders representing different parties, different regions. They would not want a strong candidate over there. Now, what will happen will be decided by the people, by the electorate, by the people of India.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure whether a kind of a federal front which is focused only on defeating the BJP and then looking after its the interest of its regional constituents is up to matching the kind of challenges that India faces today.
Hmm.
Having a prime minister who is who's acceptable to all the regional leaders, and having a prime minister who can meet those external challenges are two very different things.
No, but stranger things have happened, right? Because you have the Shiv Sena and Congress and alliance in Maharashtra, and so far, I mean, they seem to be making a go of it. Although it was at that time said that they didn't have Rahul Gandhi's blessings, and he was thought that they were unsuitable for each other. But they're holding on to power.
To be very fair, that they have, in spite of all the actions that you could see in the initial phases,
Hmm.
uh, they have done fairly well to be able to coordinate their act together. And I don't see, look at the kind of shocks which that coalition has faced. They have had that Mumbai police and their home minister kind of a shock,
Shocking things, yeah.
shocking things. They've had other problems also, but they have managed.
Hmm.
Here, it is worth pointing out that if you look at the BJP's performance over the last 4 or 5 years, not 4 or 5 years, probably a shorter period of time, somehow they seem to be facing some kind of resistance at the state level. They could not, uh, despite being the single largest party in Maharashtra, they could not form the government. They lost Jharkhand. Uh, they've had teething problems in Karnataka. Madhya Pradesh was, they had a long period, they had been in power there for a long period of time, and they came very close to crossing that threshold on their own. So, all I'm just trying to say is that at the state level, somehow the momentum seems to have uh, somehow weakened a little bit as compared to their national ambitions, which remain intact. I mean, I have
Yeah.
very little doubt about that.
Hmm.
So, probably that is something worth watching out, especially when you have a third front or a federal front kind of a arrangement being conceived. Although, again, I would agree with Sandipan that 2024 is distant. A lot many things can happen between now and then.
See, the only reason for the federal front coming into existence would be to keep the BJP out. There is no other reason, and
Hmm.
I think to some extent this contradictory government in Maharashtra, with Shiv Sena and Congress, they are still together because of the
Red
perceived threat from the
animosity.
BJP that the BJP
Yeah.
must not come back. That is what is part of the glue that is keeping this party together. In
Hmm.
fact, what happened in these West Bengal elections, this consolidation of anti-BJP votes. See, during the campaign, a lot of Bengali so-called intellectuals and Bengali actors, singers, etc., they released music videos, interviews. They went on road shows. They posted on social media. Most of them had only one message: not a single vote to BJP. Don't vote for BJP. They did not explicitly say who to vote for. So the West Bengal electorate, the anti-BJP electorate, actually mm, saw those messages, sort of decoded them, and voted en masse for the
Okay.
party that had the best chance.
So there was this chatter before that the left is telling their people that their voters that vote for the BJP that 21 mein Ram, 26 mein Bam or something to that effect. But obviously that didn't play out on the ground.
No, there were rumors during the 2019 Lok Sabha elections also that the left asked their supporters to vote for BJP to keep Mamata Banerjee in check. They said Mamata Banerjee must be kept in check and we'll handle BJP later. So BJP has the best chance. So, I mean, these are rumors. I have no idea whether they were true or not. And the rumors in these West Bengal elections were that the left told their supporters to vote for Mamata to keep the BJP in check.
Someone has a question for you. It's unrelated, but they're saying that they know that you're keeping a close eye on the Panchayat election in UP. Is that true?
Me?
Sandipan.
Panchayat elections in UP.
I don't know why they're saying that, but this either they know you or something, or this.
No, the only thing I know about the only thing I know about the panchayat elections in UP is that the UP government didn't want to hold the panchayat elections and wanted to postpone them, and the Allahabad High Court insisted that the elections be held. And I think 150 poll workers who were manning the booths, etc., have already died from COVID. That is the only thing I know about these elections. They are a tragedy. That's all.
No, I think what's happening is that, of course, everyone's eyes are now slowly shifting to UP, and everything from the panchayat election to everything else will be under the big microscope, so to speak. What do you think, Siddharth? Do you think the Congress is going to split, or is it going to stick it out? I asked this question 2 weeks ago, and everybody said no on that panel. But now, post these results, where it's been quite a disastrous performance for them, what do you think going forward? Is there going to be something?
It's hard to say, because internal dynamics of these parties are not, they're rather opaque about what happens. But I'll say one thing. The party is now in that kind of a situation that, I often hear people saying that, oh, if they have a non-Gandhi family leadership, probably the party has a chance. But, Sandipan said it very clearly that, if they are not going to have that kind of strong glue which holds those regional leaders together, then there is probably a greater chance that they're going to split and go their own way. So I'm not sure if they're going to split right away. There will be voices of dissent. You have those 23 leaders who have always said that we need, some kind of a change. I suspect you'll keep on hearing those kinds of voices every now and then. But whether the party is going to split, I doubt it.
Mr. Deb, what do you think?
No, I also doubt that the party would split, because where will these people go? Most of them can't win elections on their own anyway. And the people like Amarinder Singh who are winning elections, they don't need the Congress from Delhi, leaders from outside Punjab, etc. He doesn't need any advice. He doesn't need them to come and address rallies. Nothing. So I think they will all look after their own individual personal interests and stick together, because it just serves everybody's purpose. Of course, before the 2024 elections, but that is 3 years from now, there may be a lot of defections from the Congress, depending on the political situation then. But one cannot predict the political situation then at all. But if the situation becomes worse, looks worse for the Congress, there could be defections at that point of time. But not before that, I think.
There's a question from Jordan. He wants to know, do you think BJP campaigning in villages and not in cities made a difference? Because the urban population has mostly voted for the BJP earlier.
Not in West Bengal.
Okay.
Kolkata has never been, even in 2019, the Lok Sabha elections, when BJP had a very good show. Urban West Bengal has never voted BJP, and this time in the elections, all 11 seats have gone to Trinamool, because the urban educated Bengali, his values, he believes, do not align with the BJP's perceived values at all.
Yeah, because Temp is saying Kolkata is full of BJP lost in Jungle Mahal, and that's what hurt the most.
No, there are certain districts in West Bengal where it's quite amazing that the BJP lost. In Jungle Mahal, Jhargram, etc. There were some districts that BJP could not have won anything at all because of the demographics. But there are other districts where it is quite surprising. But that is what I said, vote consolidation. The anti-BJP vote consolidation was very strong and very effective.
What do you think are the big lessons? And this is my last question to both of you. What do you think are the big lessons from this election for the different parties, be it the BJP or the Congress?
For the BJP, I think if we take Assam and West Bengal, the two states where the party was a major player, I think the lesson is that the BJP Central Strategy Committee or whatever the party has in Delhi, they should listen more to the local leaders. For example, in Assam, it was Himanta Biswa Sharma who was the strategizer, who knew the ground realities, who organized everything. I mean, he is the person who should get the credit for the BJP's victory in Assam. And in West Bengal, as far as I know, most of the strategies were crafted in Delhi. I think it is quite doubtful whether the local leaders who knew the state, who knew the people, who had a keen sense of what was going on, whether they were listened to much at all. I think they should have listened to the local leaders. They should delegate more locally, and they should build up leaders in the states for the future who could rise to the sort of strategic intelligence or cleverness of Himanta Biswa Sharma.
That sounds very similar to what the complaint against the Congress was some time back, when they still held a couple of states.
Well, yes, I suppose. Because, I mean, if you win two big historic Lok Sabha elections, I suppose one starts believing that you know it all. But India is such a complex country, and every state has its own realities, etc. One must listen to the people who are in touch with the ground, who come from there, from the soil.
The other thing also, they didn't capitalize, I think, on the, Prime Minister Modi is a great vote catcher, and, they dropped their voter share in the assembly elections. I don't think they really built on that in the way that Mamata did after the 2019 elections, which were a rude shock to her. And, I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity for the BJP also in West Bengal.
Yeah, perhaps. But the Bengali voter, see, the Lok Sabha elections were slightly different in terms of the priorities of the voters and the aspirations and what they were voting for. When it comes to a state election, the Bengali voter is, see, the core of Bengali political thought from the beginning of the 20th century. All the political leaders that Bengal has exalted are people who have fought Delhi, or at the very least got out to Delhi in any way. Even Congress chief ministers like Dr. B.C. Roy and Siddharth Shankar Ray, they were on first name terms with their prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi. They spoke to the prime ministers as equals. The Bengali voter does not take kindly to its leaders paying obeisance, hail Modi ji, hail Amit ji every 5 minutes in their speeches. Because the basic Bengali characteristic is, we don't like Delhi, we will fight Delhi. And we are an unique breed. So I think the Modi way didn't work. And also, see, a very large chunk of Mamata's voters are women. And Bengal is one of the possibly the most liberated societies in India, as far as women are concerned.
Yes, absolutely.
And perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps Mr. Modi's Didi O Didi taunts may not have gone down well.
I don't understand this. Didi or Didi, it was actually offensive because, I couldn't understand why it was. Maybe it's a language thing or a culture, region thing, but was that really offensive to the Bengali, or was it something that just the spokesperson?
See, I didn't find it offensive, given that Mamata Banerjee was abusing Narendra Modi and Amit Shah in very, let's say, very vile terms. But and I certainly did not find Didi O Didi offensive. But the thing is that how is the message amplified and twisted and played by the Trinamool Congress? They may have
been effective in that.
Yeah. Because Mamata is a great role model for women in Bengal. One cannot deny that at all. And I know that the Trinamool grassroots political campaign definitely emphasized this, that Modi ji is insulting Didi, and through that he's insulting all women. This is misogynistic. It may have played a part. I'm not sure, but it could have.
We have a message from Karthik Salian who's saying that it's commendable even after being the biggest national party, people are criticizing it for underperforming in a state election. And nobody cares enough about a disastrous loss for the second biggest national party, which is, I mean, the BJP is actually technically done really well in Bengal, if you think about it. I mean,
yes, of course.
We're being a little too harsh here, but okay. Siddharth, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to build on this point. You know, when it comes to lessons from BJP, look at the states where the elections were held: West Bengal, Assam, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Puducherry. With the exception of Assam, the rest of all the states and the union territory are alien territory for the BJP.
That is true.
In Kerala and Tamil Nadu, its presence is not even, topsoil. It's so I don't know what lessons can be imparted for the BJP to, that it had made mistakes there, or did it do well? Those are entirely different cultural zones, impervious to the kind of things that the BJP brings to the table, which of course, you can't say that these are exceptional states. After all, the BJP has also won Assam. It's got a large presence in the Northeast. Those are also, very different states, culturally very different from what we see in North India or Western India or other parts of the country. I'm not sure. It's also, I can't find any other expression but to say that these are geographically adverse areas for that party.
Yeah.
Probably the only lesson, as Sandipan said, lies in West Bengal. That where did it, inspire? I mean, I have to say that from 3 to those many seats is a stupendous performance. Now, someone said that, oh well, they said that they would cross 200. Now, my answer to that is that from 3 to 200 is not an electoral victory; it's a revolution. And in a democracy, revolutions don't happen that way.
Very well said.
You have to be realistic about these things.
I know. I think they have been kind of they have outperformed them in many ways. But that's the way. Mr. Dev, you want to say something?
No. I fully agree with you. I think what BJP has achieved in West Bengal is quite phenomenal. Of course, the party hoped to form a government, but as Sandeep said, that would have been a revolution.
Now, this has been a very interesting debate. In fact, our views are increasing as we proceed, so it's interesting. But that means people are enjoying it and coming back and staying on and things of that nature. It's always a pleasure to talk to both of you because you're so well informed and so nuanced in your take of these issues. I really appreciate you sparing the time. It's a difficult time right now for the country, but these conversations sometimes just distract us for a bit from what's going on all around us. And that's always a little bit of a relief. And once again, I'd like to thank you and hope to have you back again soon on the show.